My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans.
And we'd like to welcome you to our new show, Magis Talk. Hi there. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, we invite you to consider this question. What is God calling me to in my life right now, today? That's a big question right off the bat. But it's a great question to sit with, right? I mean, take a moment if you can. If you're in a place where you can close your eyes, maybe take a deep breath, and sit with this question. What is God calling me to in my life right now, today?
What stirs within you as you hear that question? Is it a question that excites you? Did something come to mind when you asked it? Is it a question that perhaps feels overwhelming? It's a big question. Is it a question you've ever asked before? However you are feeling when you sit with this question, know that God is right there with you. And if you feel moved to, perhaps later in the day, maybe ask God directly, God, what are you calling me to in my life today?
It's good to be with you. My name is Dan.
And I'm Ian.
And we'd like to welcome you to our new show, Magis Talk, where we ask that same question each time. What is God calling me to in my life today? For our episode today, we'd like to tell you a little bit about ourselves, as well as our religious order, the Society of Jesus. And finally, we want to share with you what our hopes are for this program in the coming weeks. Thanks for being with us, and we look forward to being with you.
As I said earlier, my name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent, which we'll explain what that means here in a few minutes. I've been here in Belize for a little over a year now. Before coming here, I was studying journalism and philosophy at Fordham University in the Bronx, New York. And in October of 2020, I was sent here to work as a prison chaplain at Wagner's youth facility at Belize Central Prison. Aside from my work at the prison, I've also worked and served as a campus minister at St. John's College High School, and I assist at St. Martin de Porres Catholic Parish in the south side of Belize City as well. Now,
Ian, in your free time, you like to play a lot of soccer. Why don't you fill us in on that?
Well, excuse my friend here, Dan. It's called football here. And I'm kind of a football fanatic. That usually comes up at the dinner table. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans, but that's a side project that I like to do. If you want to come play some pickup ball, I'm usually at Princess Margaret Field a couple days a week, so maybe I'll see you out there.
All right. And my name is Dan Finucane. I entered the Jesuits back in 2017, and I'm currently a regent along with Ian. I arrived here in Belize last August, and what I'm doing here is I'm working as a chaplain out at Belize Central Prison with Ian, and I also am helping start a project here in Belize City called the Jesuit Migrant Accompaniment Project, which is helping people from other countries in Central America who've moved here to Belize to help them get adjusted, help them get acquainted with Belizean society. More specifically, I'll be starting an ESL program, actually starting at the end of this week. Before I was here, I was studying at Loyola University in Chicago, taking classes in the humanities.
And Dan here, since he called me out on my own passions and interests, Dan here is a very talented guitar musician and painter and drawer. So yeah, I don't know if you want to say a few words about that, Dan.
Sure, yeah. I love just taking time when I can to sit back, play some music. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people. So it's really great. We have a couple of guys staying with us for a few weeks from Chile, and we've already begun to make some music. And yeah, I love to draw. I love to paint. I love watercolor paintings. I don't do it as much as I'd like, but I'm hoping to get back into it here and there.
I imagine we'll have Dan play the guitar here on at least some of the future episodes that we have. So as Dan and I both said, we're Jesuit regents, and that's a stage of Jesuit formation. And just to break it down really quick, Jesuit formation lasts anywhere between 15 and 20 years. And the first 2 years are what Jesuits call the novitiate. And that's a time which the Jesuit novice, as we're called then, undergoes the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola. That's a 30-day silent retreat. So a 30-day without speaking except to God, to Jesus, to the Holy Spirit, maybe to the saints. And so you'll hear more about the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola as we have future episodes. And aside from deepening a life of prayer during the novitiate, novices are also engaging in ministry and community life, which are core components of Jesuit religious life. And the purpose of all of this is to discern whether they feel called to take vows as a novice, or as a Jesuit, excuse me. And these vows are vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. These are the three religious vows. And Jesuits can take these vows as scholastics, which means they are studying to become priests, or they can take vows as Jesuit brothers.
And if Jesuits discern to take vows, the next step in our formation is that we get sent to a university to begin studies, usually in philosophy, and other areas of interest that are useful to our ministry. Ian, maybe you could tell us a little bit. You studied journalism at Fordham. Why do you think that's important for your ministry?
Before entering the Jesuits, I studied a little bit of journalism, and then when I was sent to first studies to study philosophy, I discerned that I still felt called to engage in that study of journalism, and I think that's really rooted in one of the reasons why I was drawn to the Society of Jesus in particular, because we have such a wide range of ministries and apostolates, and so journalism has actually been really useful with regards to knowing how to write for shows, maybe like this one, to edit, to craft articles, written articles, things like that. So it's just whatever's useful for our apostolic ministry. Those are things that Jesuits can study.
That's great. For us, studies last between 2 to 4 years, and then the Jesuit moves on to the stage that Ian and I are at now called regency. Basically, regency is a time where young Jesuits, put on the life of being in a community, being in a full-time ministry. And the idea is that we work full-time and figure out what it's like to be a Jesuit in the world doing the work of the society. For example, as we mentioned, we're both chaplains at Belize Central Prison. And as I mentioned, I work at the Jesuit Migrant Accompaniment Project.
And so regency lasts usually between 2 and 3 years. And then after that, the Jesuit, whether they're a scholastic or a brother, is sent to study theology. And that's important of course, for men who are studying to become priests to study theology. But brothers also study it because it serves them in their service to the people of God. And so we're all sent to study the God stuff, as we like to say. And so theology studies last between 3 to 4 years, and then Jesuit scholastics are ordained to the priesthood.
So how long is this ultimately? How long are we in this formation process? It feels like a long time.
Yes, if our viewers were, if they were keeping track of the years, if they were doing the math, that's at least 11 to 12 years of formation, which is a long time, you might be saying, and it is.
Yeah.
But guess what? It ain't over.
Yeah, that's right. It's not over once guys are ordained or as brothers once they go through theology studies. Even after ordination or even after theology for brothers, formation isn't over yet. There's a third year of the novitiate that comes usually about 15 years into our life as Jesuits. It's called tertianship. And that name, tertianship, comes from tertiary, or third, meaning a third year of novitiate. So that means that after being in for many years, we as Jesuits go back to the basics. We go back to where it all began. And tertianship usually lasts about a year. And again, as we mentioned, during the novitiate, Jesuits go through the 30-day exercises. During the tertianship, once they've been in for 15 years, they go back through the exercises in the 30-day form. Really, we usually only make the exercises in that form twice. Besides the retreat, Jesuits engage in ministry in marginalized communities usually, and we study our constitutions, which lay out in detail the structure and the purpose of our lives as Jesuits. You may be wondering, what does that mean to have constitutions? Well, it's kind of like a country having a constitution. The constitutions for us set an ideal and a way to achieve that ideal, just like a country has a constitution that sets down laws and ideals for how the country should be run. When St. Ignatius and other Jesuits at the very beginning formed the Society of Jesus, they felt that they were responding to a call from God, but they knew that they needed to have a structure in order for that life to have any meaning and to invite new people into this life, and so they wrote the constitutions. All that said, once tertianship is completed, a Jesuit waits to take what are called final vows. So we take first vows at the end of 2 years of the novitiate, and then 15 to 20 years later, we're fully incorporated, if we're invited, into the society in a full way. But the Jesuits have something interesting that's unique to us. We have a fourth vow. So along with poverty, chastity, and obedience, we take a special vow of obedience to the Pope. And what this does is, whatever we're doing as Jesuits, the Pope can send us wherever there's a need in the world that the Pope sees.
That's right. So, okay, that's a lot of background on Jesuit formation, but we thought it might be helpful because we're using a weird word like regent, and so what does that mean? So now I hope you got a brief little outline of Jesuit formation. But you might be asking, all right, guys, but what are y'all doing in Belize? And that's a good question. Dan and I have only been here a short time ourselves. Like I said, I've been here just a little over a year. Dan, you're going on 6 months or so?
A little under 6 months.
And so we still haven't experienced Belize outside the pandemic, which I'm really looking forward to, God willing, that happens soon. But even though we've only been here for a short amount of time, the Jesuits have actually been here since 1851. It was really the Society of Jesus that helped establish the Catholic Church here in Belize. And so throughout the history of Belize, Jesuits have been involved in running Catholic parishes and schools, and we're still involved in that same work today. Today, the Jesuits have 2 parishes in the country. That's St. Martin de Porres Parish in the south side of Belize City, and St. Peter Claver Parish in Punta Gorda. And St. Peter Claver Parish is actually sort of the mother church of all of the Catholic churches in Toledo District. And so our 2 priests out there stay busy serving the 30-plus Mayan villages out in Toledo District. And so pray for them in their work. We know they stay busy and they need those prayers.
And we don't just run parishes. As you probably know, the Jesuits have been involved with St. John's College, founded St. John's College over 135 years ago. And then after it was begun, a junior college was added to the high school. As most of you know, a lot of people, men and women, have gone through St. John's College, and a lot of leaders here in Belize went through St. John's College. The other thing with regards to education is that Jesuits have schools at both of our parishes in Punta Gorda and in Belize City. But the thing is, we're not just involved in education and parishes. We also have a history of helping with what we call social apostolates as well. Social ministries, where we go out to kind of the margins of the community and we meet people where they are. As Ian and I have mentioned, for us, this means we go out to the prison and we spend time with men and the young men there and support them, accompany them, walk with them in whatever it is that they're going through. The thing is, as Jesuits, we're constantly discerning what more we can do. We're looking for what we call the Magis, the more. Where is it that God can call us in a deeper way to serve the people here in Belize and throughout the world?
And when we say Magis, when we say that means more, we don't talk about that like, I want Magis money, or I want Magis popularity, or anything like that. Magis is really rooted in a motto that we have in the Society of Jesus, Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam, which is for the greater glory of God. So Magis is rooted in the Jesuit seeking to always serve the greater glory, to always seek how we can deepen that service, how we can deepen that relationship with Christ, and how we can lead other people into that same relationship. And so it's really rooted in this ever-present call that God gives us in our life.
And it's that call that we feel is at the heart of our show. That's why we have made the name of our show Magis Talk, because we really believe that that question we started with, what is God inviting me to today, right now, is a question that we're invited to consider and pray with and reflect on every day of our lives. We come back to it again and again, trusting that God is always inviting us into newness, into a greater depth, and always encouraging us to seek out the Magis in our own lives.
And that includes every person. That includes you. You see, our founder, St. Ignatius of Loyola, he believed that the goal of every person's life is to praise, reverence, and serve God with our lives. And he believed that we can do this in whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. This means that we can learn how to do this even if we're still learning about the Christian faith or beginning our faith journey. That God's call to us is always present, always calling us to a deeper relationship. And we can learn how to do this even if we made mistakes in our lives, even if we've made big mistakes in our lives. And as you'll learn in future episodes, St. Ignatius Loyola, he made some big mistakes in his life, but God used those to help him transform the world through this religious order that he established and continues to serve the church today. But that's a story we'll tell in future episodes.
And the thing is, perhaps you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, things are going pretty well for me in my faith journey. And I think Ian and I would agree, we feel like that a lot too. And yet, I think that's actually the place where God calls us the most sometimes. When we feel like we've got it all figured out, we often find that God is kind of poking at that and saying, oh yeah? Well, how about this? And so we hope that our show invites you to go deeper than where you are currently. Because we know that however deep our faith currently is, can always go deeper. At the heart of our faith is a mystery. The mystery of God, the mystery of God's love, which draws us deeper into love for God, but how we show that is for love of other people. Mm-hmm. So to put it kind of simply, we're all pilgrims. We're all on this road trying to figure out where God is calling us. St. Ignatius used the idea of being a pilgrim when he wrote his autobiography, or actually when he dictated it to his secretary. He didn't ever use the pronoun I. He never said, I did this, I did that, we did this, we did that. He always referred to himself as the pilgrim. And I think that's important because I think we're in the same boat ourselves.
That's right. So our hope is that our program will be a space where we can walk this road together and learn together to better hear God's voice in our lives in order to serve the church, in order to serve the people around us. And this is important for us as individuals, but especially for us as a church. And especially as our church engages in the work of the synod, of what we call the synodality, which means journeying together, right? So it's about walking this path, this journey of faith together. Absolutely.
And so each week, what we're hoping to do is we're hoping to ask that question, what is God calling me to in my life right now? By learning more about the Catholic faith. So we hope to propose topics and discuss them that get at the richness of our faith, that really go deep, and to immerse ourselves, especially in the richness of Scripture. This is so important for really understanding who Jesus is and who God has been throughout the entirety of salvation history. And when we look at Scripture, we hope at times to do guided meditations, leading you through an opportunity to really encounter Jesus in your imagination.
We also look forward to sharing these guided meditations and from the richness of the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola. This is our spirituality. It's a gift that Ignatius gave the church and that the Jesuits continue to work and strive to provide the people of God today. And so, as we mentioned above, we hope to seek and discover God in all things. We hope to find God in all things and grow in our ability to discern how to better serve God in the circumstances of our lives. We also hope to feature interviews with influential women and men of faith here in Belize. And this is really to hear about how God is at work here in Belize already. We trust that God's been at work here doing wonderful things through the people of God. And often through what we might otherwise look at as ordinary things, right? But that's exactly where God is working, in the ordinary parts of our lives. So we hope to bring in people who are living it out, maybe ordinary lives in heroic ways, right? Because God calls us to that kind of service no matter what we're doing.
And most importantly, we look forward to hearing from you. We want to hear what you're interested in, the questions that you have, maybe the things that kind of frustrate you or confuse you about the faith, because we want to go there. We want to go there to talk about those things and discern where God is in the midst of those questions. So we encourage you to write to us with your questions. In future episodes, we'll have a way to do that that's more formal, but for now, we just ask that you contact Guadalupe Media and let them know that you've watched our show, that you've listened to our show, and that you'd like to put your questions, your concerns, the issues that you're interested in, and let us know. And so that's our first episode. We appreciate you joining us. We'd like to end with a sign-out question. So, Dan, I'm going to ask you about who's one of your favorite saints, and it can't be St. Ignatius of Loyola, and why? Sure. So I've been thinking about this saint a lot the last few days because another person who's on the path to canonization, Father Rutilio Grande, Blessed Rutilio Grande, a Salvadoran Jesuit who was killed in 1977, helped this other saint in his own process of discerning where God was calling him. And that saint that I'm referring to is St. Oscar Romero. In my room at the Jesuit residence, I have an icon of St. Oscar Romero holding a child. And it's an icon that I look at often and think about a lot because to me it really exemplifies what St. Oscar Romero was about being with the poor, being with those who are most forgotten, the voices that don't get heard. He was able to amplify those voices. An example of that, every homily that Oscar Romero gave once he was Archbishop was broadcast throughout the country on the radio. And his homilies would sometimes be an hour and a half, 2 hours long. Imagine that. But people were riveted to their radios because what he was doing is he was reading lists of people who had been disappeared, who had been killed. And their families, who had no idea where they were, at least heard the names of their loved ones. And so to me, St. Oscar Romero really exemplifies Christ drawing near to the people. So much so that he shared in the fate of 70,000 Salvadorans during the Civil War of the 80s. He was killed himself while celebrating Mass on March 24th, 1980. So he's somebody that I look up to and hope to emulate in some small way, probably a very imperfect way in my own life. What about you, Ian? Who's somebody, a holy person, a saint that you look up to, that you spend time with in prayer?
Yeah, somebody who's been involved in my faith journey, especially since I began discerning a vocation to the Jesuits, is a guy named Father Walter Chizik. Father Walter Chizik was a Polish-American priest. He grew up in pretty simple circumstances. His family were farmers. He discerned a vocation to the priesthood, and he was ordained around the time of the 1930s. And around the time of his ordination, the Pope sent out a request for priests to go to the Soviet Union to serve the church there. And the church, of course, this was the Soviet Union was a communist country, and religion was suppressed there, and so especially the Roman Catholic Church. And so he was sent to study there in secrecy, basically. So he was kind of a Catholic spy of sorts. But he wasn't a very good one, because basically on the train ride into the country, he was arrested pretty quickly. And he ended up being accused initially of being a German spy, and then of being a Vatican spy. But really his mission in the Soviet Union was to serve the people of God, was to serve the church, was to provide masses, hear confessions, give the sacraments, walk with people, right? That was his mission. And he went there and was arrested, and you would think, okay, he's done, right? His mission's failed. But that wouldn't be true. He actually continued to serve. He has this extraordinary story where even in prison, even when he was in solitary confinement, he was still celebrating the Mass. At least he was praying through the Mass. He had memorized the Mass so much that he continued to recite the prayers even in his incarceration. And eventually, when he was moved to be with other people, he would celebrate the sacraments in whatever way he could for the people of God where he was at. And the amazing thing about Walter Chizik is he was in the Soviet Union imprisoned for basically 15 to 20 years. He eventually was released from incarceration there, but he couldn't leave the country, and so he was working there, and he was still getting, tabs were still kept on him by the Soviet government, but he was still working as a priest, even though his day job was as an auto mechanic. He was still working as a priest. And he was gone so long, and he couldn't reach out to his family or friends or anyone in the Society of Jesus, that actually they thought he was dead. And so the Jesuits had a funeral for Father Walter Chizik. And then about 25 years after he was originally captured, the U.S. ended up making a trade of two people who were convicted Soviet spies. They traded for Father Walter Chizik. And Walter Chizik got to come back to the States and live out the rest of his days in New York City. And he, again, was giving the sacraments and giving retreats, and also writing a couple books about his experience in Russia. He wrote a book called With God in Russia, which had a huge impact on me as I was discerning my vocation. And then also a book called In His Spirit. And both of these are these amazing accounts of all of his journeys through Russia and the amazing things God did. He was such he had such a profound belief in the providence of God and how providential God was, that God was always walking with him, always helping him to serve people, even though he was in these extraordinarily difficult circumstances. And so when I was in New York City, I actually was living in the building that Walter Chizik died in, and it's now called Chizik Hall, and it's a house of studies for Jesuits in First Studies. And so I refer to myself as a Chizikian, as all the other guys who were at Chizik Hall do as well. And so I look to him as really one of my partners in faith. You know, he's definitely a saint I look to as an example of serving God no matter the circumstances. And what better person that I can't think of few other people who really exemplified this question that we have for our show. What is God calling me to today? Father Walter Chizik was asking that every day of his life, even in the harshest conditions. And so when we're in beautiful Belize, this is a great place to ask that question. And we're happy to be walking with you and finding the answers every day, every week. And so we hope you join us again. as our show airs throughout the week.
Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.